everyone, and welcome back to Build and Thrive, the podcast dedicated to improving your health and your happiness in the construction industry. I am your host, Jennie Armstrong, and as always, before we get started, a big thank you to our sponsors, GKR Scaffolding. So today I have a very exciting guest. His name is Colin. And Colin actually was a recommendation from one of our previous guests, Chris Rogers. So thank you, Chris, if you're listening. So Colin is going to come with a very interesting perspective for us. And he's had 22 years working in the construction industry. He started in the gas sector. Has done his master's, but is now also working on his doctorate and looking specifically about mental health in construction. So I know Colin is going to bring some really interesting early insights into his research. I think you've mentioned about stigma and culture, workplace factors. So really excited to learn a little bit more about your journey and everything that you've got to share with us. So thank you, Colin. Thanks for joining us.
You're very welcome. I'm looking forward to the discussion we're about to have. Thank you.
No, thanks, Colin. And I suppose just to kind of give a bit more of a background to you and how you've got to where you are today, just tell us a little bit about your history and your career.
Okay, so yeah, as you alluded to, I started in the gas industry around about 19 years old. So 2004, joined Balfour Beatty as a sort of service layer and sort of as an apprentice sort of main layer. Yeah, so I did a number of months on the tools. Worked my way through that, and it was at that point that I realised I don't think I was really cut out for working outside, in terms of my physical attributes. So yeah, I noticed, sort of looking at some of the people I was working around, in terms of their ages and how their bodies were coping with the stress of working outside. I could see myself in sort of 30, 40 years' time going down the same avenue. So it kind of interested me to sort of move away from that. And I could see these sub-agents coming onto site wearing, shirts and ties and coming in company cars. So I thought, I want a slice of that. So I kind of looked at trying to come off site, and I was quite lucky in being able to do that. And so I worked my way through the sort of office departments, and I really enjoyed the construction industry because it really wasn't an industry I left college thinking I was going to get into. I was going to be a museum curator. It was my ideal profession for some
quite
reason.
A different one there.
Yeah, but moved through the sort of departments and ended up getting into sort of site management. And that's when I realised I could make a bit of a difference to people's working lives. Having that lived experience of using the breaker out on site, breaking concrete and just what it does to your physical body. And so I started focusing on sort of physical safety and rather than the wellbeing. That was something that came much later on. I realised that I didn't want people to suffer the way I suffered. And so looked at ways I could sort of upskill myself from a professional basis. I started looking at things like NEBOSH, IOSH, as I was sort of working my way through the sort of construction manager role, because I used to find that the support that I did get from the safety professionals I worked with at the time wasn't very supportive. It was very much bureaucratic, red tape, and
quite old school
you
ways
can't
of doing it.
do that. Yeah, exactly. Whereas I was like, once I started upskilling myself, those frustrations disappeared a touch. It's like, you're quite right, you can't do that, but actually you can do it like this instead. So it wasn't like trying to get around the red tape, but it was like, you're not giving me the suggestions where we can do things safely in a different manner. So I found that benefited my construction management role, that I was able to find ways around blockers, but professionally and safely. And when I kind of moved out of the construction manager role, because I realised I'd had quite a long roll of the dice with that, and I'd had a really successful career to date at that point with no significant injuries. I'd had a couple of close calls, and going through those experiences really kind of alerted me to the fact that I don't want to experience anything more significant. And so I moved away from that and sort of got into more sort of the client side of things, again collaborating with the principal contractors, but moving into sort of like I would call it a clerk of works element. So and that was something that I seemed to really enjoy. Again, it wasn't something I saw or looked for, but so I moved into the sort of project supervisory clerk of works role, and that's when I got the opportunity during COVID, which is how I met Chris Rogers, to undertake my masters. So it was COVID. We couldn't get people to go to site. And one of the things that my employer at the time, which was National Grid, it still is, we kind of struck a sort of an agreement where if I've got to work away for this extended period of time, I need something to do in the evenings because everywhere was shut. And so, I said, can I do my masters? It's something I've been looking at since I've done my NEBOSH diploma, because I'm into sort of upskilling myself from a professional basis. And I ended up doing that for a couple of years whilst I worked away. So the whole time I worked away, in the evenings in the hotel, the hospitality industry was shut, I was doing my masters in my hotel room. And so finished that.
We've got a lot of spare time to do that.
Exactly. So, but again, you look at it from a mental health perspective, it kept me. So even when the pubs did reopen in the late 21, and it kept me out of the pub. So from a mental health perspective, mental well-being, it was really healthy for me, and I never realised at the time. And it was that perspective, looking back, that I went, I'm not finished learning. There's more to do here. And so I left it 12, 18 months to give myself a bit of a break to get back focusing on my family, because I lost a lot of time with my children during COVID, and I wanted to rebuild those relationships. And I reached a point where I went, now I'm ready to do the next level up, which was either a PhD or a doctorate, a professional doctorate. And I managed to get accepted on a professional doctorate at the University of Sunderland to do that. But the element of why I landed on the subject matter that I did was because of what I'd seen over the years, in the 20 odd years that I'd been doing it. I'd seen and I'd lived the experience of losing people that I work closely with to suicide. And there's one story that sticks in my mind around, I had a direct report working for me that I'd been working with for about 9 months. I'm looking after a team of direct labour. Said cheerio on the Friday, came back in on the Monday. The main team leader, where's person X? And they died by suicide over the weekend. Obviously, that was not the terminology they used at the time. It was 2008, 2009, and I was this person's line manager, and I was absolutely staggered. Obviously, and I look back now and reflect, and I still have a bit of PTSD with that, because
I'm sure.
When I then had to report the lines that this individual hadn't turned up for work, it became very bureaucratic in terms of I had to report an absence. Why is this person not turned in? Well, they died by suicide over the weekend. And all right, okay. So do we need to look at re-recruiting this? I'm like, and so this is 2008, 2009. And it was that experience that really stuck with me, and I kind of almost parked it for probably 10 or 12 years. And I look back now after all of the reading and the studying I've done, and I sit there and go, we got no support from, and this was a tier 1 principal contractor that is still in successful business now. No support, and none of the team was support. These were people that had picked this individual up for years. They'd mentored them. They were friends. They went to the pub together, and so the psychological long-lasting aspect of that, really, I don't know now, but I'd love to bump into them and say, how were you supported after that? Because I didn't receive any support, and I was only this individual line manager, and I couldn't. That then didn't enable me to offer these individuals support. I wasn't directed or signposted to any wellbeing or EAP, as in like these people might need counselling. So it went from that to what re-triggered that element for me, and really sort of brought it back to the surface was, as I was starting my doctorate in 2022, they were asking what sort of subject matter did you want to study. Well, my master's had been around behavioural based safety. I thought, I'm really interested in this. My partner had done a master's in psychology, so I was able to tap into her knowledge around behavioural safety and context behind behaviour. And I was on another principal contractor's site, another tier 1 principal contractor, and I'd been sat in the office as the client's representative, and we'd been alerted to, there was loads of noise in the background. I was just going through a bit of paperwork. What's going on? And there's been an incident on site. Oh, right, okay. as the client, you tend to hear last. So you get that watered down, you get that watered down evolution, don't you? And it came through. We've observed a scaffolder unattached on the second lift, and I'm thinking, well, that's about 4.5 meters, and I'm like, so we've told him to get straight down. He's coming back to the office now, Colin. We're going to deal with it. Don't you worry. I'm like, all right. You're not dealing it on behalf for me, you know. And it was at that moment, and I'm sat just bouncing ideas as I was looking at some research around sort of preventative mental health. I'm like, hang on a minute, has anybody asked this individual when he came down, is he okay? What do you mean? Has anybody, before you've gone straight to the punitive disciplinary approach, have you gone, are you all right? You know, and because we champion mental health, we've got mental health. Has anybody asked this individual that has demonstrated risk-taking behaviour, which is a symptom of, you know, mental health and issues therewith? And they hadn't gone, you know, this individual, he very well could have just been, I can't be bothered. But some of the data I've got tells you that, you know, 1 in 5 or so might be, my partner's just taken the children and said I can't see them for a month now, and she's breaking up with me, or that, you know, or something. Could have been any number of things, but I thought nobody's asked if this individual has done that for anything other than I'm just taking a shortcut.
Human behaviour, human error. He's made a mistake or whatever. He's not followed the rules.
And you look at
see that a lot.
Exactly, and that's one of the things that my research is starting to point to. We need to change the focus of investigation causal analysis, because everything at the moment, you've just said, is it's always lack of concentration or human error, and it's like that. Let's stop calling that a root cause. Right, come down another layer, because this doesn't happen at the moment. Why did that person make an error, or why did that person have a lack of concentration? And it just stops at that. But the executive summary will just go, yep, lack of concentration. Yep, that's we need to retrain them, or punitive action, disciplinary. Whereas actually, you go down the next layer and you sit there and go, lack of concentration because, and then it's like that onion, isn't it? There's another layer to
What's the next bit? And equally, that the you know, sometimes that is, what have we done to contribute to that human error factor as well? And there's still that, it's an individual thing. What's gone on, and rather than that self reflection. I mean, I remember having a conversation once with a black hat about this principle, exactly what you're talking about. And he used to use the term, he's away with the mixer. His mind would be on the mixer and thinking about just going and spinning around. And he said it was a term that they, you know, if their mind wasn't on the job, they would regularly refer to it. So they knew it was happening, and they knew the people that were probably it was happening with, and whatever reason. But again, just passed off as a individual factor.
Yeah, they'll know that this individual. These people, we need to give credit to these teams in terms of they do talk, and I would never be dismissive of that element of. You know, people go, they shouldn't be going to the pub in the evening and having a drink, and it's affecting their mental health and it's substance. There's a difference. There's an element of substance misuse, but sometimes that socialisation in the evening is them having that therapy, that counselling. The chances are they do know that these individuals are going through potential personal issues. But like I say, a lot of my data and the research that I'm teasing out actually is referring more to the main problem is around work-related factors and that sort of structural mechanism behind, you know, long working hours, excessive working hours, time away from family. These are all things, you know, when people start to, he's brought a personal problem into it. Well, of course he has. We're only human. This, you know, you bring your whole self to work. Bring yourself
to work. I was going to say the same thing.
And you can't control that person is having. I keep going back to a relationship problem, but it could be anything: bereavement, anything that would be affecting
money problems.
Precisely. But of course you can bring it, but we can focus, and this is all I can do at the moment, is focus on the work-related factor where we can impact on this individual's life and make it a little bit easier for them. And that's where I think we're going to meet the resistance, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, is there a big gap in research that, because everything you're talking about is kind of anecdotal things that I'd talk to my clients about, take accountability for what you can take accountability for, but
Yeah.
there's never been really a strong research base to back up some of these things. But most people can nod along and say, "Oh, I can see how that would relate." But I suppose, are you filling a bit of a gap where there's not enough research in that's happened to date?
So as part of like undertaking a doctoral research study, you've got to try and find something that's not really been looked at before.
Absolutely.
You've got to find a finite gap. So my supervisor keeps saying, by the end of this, you will become an subject matter expert in this really narrow window of this thing. So where I've teased into or hacked into the gap in knowledge and research is, what I'm looking at is the preventative measure of sort of mental health around, so teasing it back to that scaffolding operative having the incident and being observed unattached. It was basically, but when people display this risk-taking behaviour or have a minor to moderate safety incident, is this an indicator of somebody experiencing mental health distress or a mental health issue? And so that's where the gap in current literature knowledge is. Everybody knows that mental health can gets impacted by work, but where I'm looking at is the preventative nature. So if I had a magic wand, I'd sit there and go, say 1 in every 5 minor or moderate safety incident or near miss can be attributed to somebody experiencing a mental health episode or needing a bit of help, and that one person every 5 we can take to one side and go, right, we're going to deal with this individual in this manner, but the other 4, it is something that you shouldn't have done, and you shouldn't have done. And so you're looking at 1 in 5, and you're getting them at the very beginning before it increases and the distress increases and the likelihood of them doing something more serious, displaying more risk taking behaviour. I've been very keen not to study suicide as much as that's on a tacit on everybody's tongue, because the ethical requirements around that kind of doctoral research is absolutely massive, and so that is another field, and people are looking at that element. But I'm looking at more of the, before we even get to that stage, what can we do for this individual? So that's where the gap in knowledge is at the moment, and that's where my research is hoping to fill that little bit of a gap. And the way doctoral research works is basically, I've got a theory, I'm developing that theory, I'm developing that framework, and it's correct at the time of going to publication, but only so long as until the next person behind after me then disproves my theory. But that I want them to, because they'll only improve on it, and basically my work I'm doing is improving on previous people's theories and work. So yeah, it's just that constant evolution of improvement. So I'm not offended if somebody goes, actually you didn't discover or you didn't talk about, and I'm like, but I've got you looking at it and I've got you thinking about it. That's the main goal.
And interesting. I mean, I talk about this with my team quite a lot. Like what's the messaging that's going to land to organisations that you need to take action? And the suicide piece is obviously extremely important, but I think people still feel that that's a far away topic. If it happens to one of their team members, obviously it's traumatic, and we hear the stats in the industry, and everyone goes, "What this? We need to do something," but it doesn't feel close enough to actually feel that you've got some accountability or some part to play in that. And actually, so we talk about it from a productivity perspective, or maybe that's the driver for organisations. Right, we're going to get more out of our people. We're going to, our programs are going to meet our targets. We're going to make more money, and that's going to be the driver. And that doesn't still seem to land. But I think the safety angle is definitely something that as the industry is now matured, that is something, because people are looking at those stats, and you've got teams of resources of people that are driving improvements, like yourself in your own business, and actually that is probably what you've identified, the gap that might start saying, right, where can we improve in this space and what can we do about it?
Yeah. The thing is, if you had data, which this is the start of that data collection. I can only put it akin to if you knew that a road had a speeding issue and it was a 60-mile-an-hour road and there's been X amount of fatalities over 5 years, the council or National Highways would turn around and go, we need to reduce the speed limit. We know people are dying on this road. We need to improve the lighting. So what can we do to improve the driver experience and the likelihood of them having a serious incident or fatality, reduce it? That kind of stuff just gets done because you've got the data. And if you translated that into this, and we know people are experiencing mental health distress. We know people are having issues, but nobody's doing anything about it. So it's like, there's a problem, but the structural upstream element. So I know it's a bit of a long-winded explanation, but the structural upstream element of like policies and interventions, again, my research highlights that they're largely ineffective. They're just performative, tokenistic, around the lines of, we want to look sort of stakeholder legitimacy. We want to look like from the outside we have an EAP, we do this, we've got a wellbeing program, but in reality, how much of that translate to the boots on the ground level where you sit there and go, right, EAP, do your subcontractors have access to that? No. How does it translate, basically? And so the mental health first aiders, fantastic, a fantastic initiative, but how successful is it? What's the feedback loop with that? Because again, what I'm reading and what I'm researching are that, yes, an organisation pays for 500 of its employees to go for a mental health first aider qualification, but who are these individuals when they have an issue on site actually going and talking to? Data tells you it's not really the mental health first aider, it's the mate in the pub or one of their peers or one of their cohort. They're really, really unlikely to go to the actual mental health first aider. So it doesn't translate very well, unfortunately, even though it's a great initiative. And I even met the MP that chaired the bill, Russell, Conservative MP for Watford. Very interesting story behind how he was looking to try and get that through. But it's that translation, and I think you'd call it organisational policy decoupling. We have it.
Yeah.
But what does it do? And this brings you back to things like, I remember having a client chat with another tier 1 contractor, and they were talking about, we are dead on for mental health. I'm like, fantastic. Give me a bit more info because I'm doing a doctorate on it. I'm like, please talk to me. Well, we do breakfast talks and we get bacon butty. I'm like, brilliant. So you have bacon butty mornings and we have it, right? What's your feedback loop from that? Well, and they really, and it got a little bit, I want to say heated because I tried to tease out what I wanted. But as far as they were concerned, just having the breakfast butty morning was enough. And I'm like, no, where's your feedback loop? And it was, basically they kept coming back to me, well, that's GDPR. And I'm like, what's GDPR? what asking them to do a quick survey at the end and going, did you enjoy this? Has it helped you signpost it? You're only asking for some very basic, limited information about just to see the success of what you're doing. Because I'd never downplay the fact that they're holding these breakfast mornings. But again, it goes back to that data when I mentioned the road. You've got data. Well, their data is, we've spent £600 this last month on bacon butties. So
well done.
Well done. But what did it give you back? Have you seen an improvement in morale, less burnout, more retention, smilier sites? But what are you getting back from that? So
and I see it over and over again. I think some of the things that common things that I see when you speak to construction workforce, and I've said this regularly on my podcast. podcast. Start again. I say this regularly on my podcast. That you've got to get some of those basic fundamentals right. Like if you've got bad welfare and you're not paying people properly, then no matter how many talks and bacon butties you give, you won't replace all of that stuff that you've done. And how are people actually feeling about those things? Focus on that bit, and then you can start looking at how do we enhance people's lives with all these amazing initiatives and things that we do. But there's not ever that thought process of how do we measure the impact. And and I know obviously we're going to go down in the research world, you want lots of data and lots of insights, and that's not always practical on a construction site, but there are things that can be taken from that to enhance and improve the working lives of these people.
Well, you asked about what the messaging might be, and I wrote down a quote because I put it verbatim in my thesis, but it's around the lines of, and I can't attribute the name at the moment, but in terms of work-related factors, and you said, what's the messaging for the upstream element is, at the moment we're failing to address work-related factors, and this directly means the construction industry is continuously creating the distress it later attempts to treat. And that really resonated with me that, we are putting downstream things in, like your mental health first aiders, we're putting in the employment assistance programme, but you wouldn't need any of that to the degree that is being suggested if you dealt with your structural mechanisms of, things like better training for your senior leadership. Because again, reading through the research, and this is not what my research has uncovered, but the qualitative element of my focus groups and the interviews that I've undertaken with people, around the lines of your supervisor, and I recognise this myself, when your supervisor talks to you authentically about their own mental health or personal issues and becomes relatable and makes themselves vulnerable, you open up more back to them. And so that authenticness around discussions, rather than just training somebody to be, I'm aware of mental health and I can see you might be experiencing a problem, that will inhibit the conversation. Whereas if you go, I had a struggle a couple of years ago, it was around issue X, and it just gives you that relatability, doesn't it? So the authenticness behind your supervisor or your team leader talking to you.
Yeah, and that must play into this whole stigma piece where people are ultimately not wanting to be vulnerable because of the fear and of the consequences of that. I suppose, is that come out as part of your research?
Yeah, so in terms of the stigma, I mean, we all talk about sort of like hypermasculinity and those are anecdotal sort of, it's generally acknowledged that the industry suffers from an element of that, and I can see that decreasing over the 22 years I've been in the industry. But things like there's a generational element of, say, I'm at 42, but my data sort of indicates from 45 and upwards, that generation up doesn't quite relate to the generation below in terms of how they view mental health. And so I've worked with individuals, and some of the feedback I got from the quotes I got from the transcriptions were, my boss can't see that I've got something stressing me out from, say, a deadline perspective, so work-related factors, so programs causing me a problem. Well, if it's not causing them a problem, so they're looking at the problem going, yeah, we are tightening up against it, but I'm fine with it. They couldn't then relate and empathise with the individual that was going, I think we're going to miss this, I'm struggling, it's causing me to lose a bit of sleep, because they didn't feel that emotion. It was invisible to them, and it's like, it doesn't exist. And so we're still just about suffering from that element of the generation above mine, for example, not understanding, and so almost seeing this next wave coming through, and it's really positive to see these 20-year-olds, 22-year-olds coming through. They're not going to the pub, they're going to the gym. They're eating the protein dinners, they're looking after themselves nutritionally, and you sat there going, I wish I'd have done that. It's taken me to get to 40 to go, I need to sleep better, I need to eat better, and not go to the pub when I'm working away. But equally, like I say, going to the pub is the social element. So yeah, I'm seeing that element of the older generation. A lot of comments came back about being dismissive around mental health. So can't see it, it's invisible, almost like the broke, he's just using it as an excuse. It's the bad back of the 80s and the 90s, prove it, and so things like it, that the negative effect of that for these people are people's mentors is that where options are open to them from that well-being perspective, I need a mental health day. They're sat there going, I don't think I can take it because I'm going to be viewed negatively, and it might
Yeah.
impact this overtime that I'm looking for on Saturday, and they might give it to somebody else that isn't complaining about the mental health, and so that's
Yeah.
the stigma that's attached to it at the moment. Is I'd quite happily tell anybody I was on anti-anxiety medication. I don't see it as a stigma. I see it as a tool to help me get over what's currently taking. But that's me, and so. Me talking openly about that might help other people talk about, whether they're on any
Yeah.
medication or help. But again, that comes back to that authentic discussions around with people that you see as your peers or your cohorts.
Yeah, it fascinates me, the whole generational piece, because I mean, one of the projects that I'm working on at the moment, we're talking about like, how do we put things into the contract, working client side? How should we put the stuff into the contractors' contracts around like what they're going to do? But this job is going to be going on till like 2050, and so
Mm-hmm.
potentially. And how can you design what a contractor provides from a health and wellbeing perspective for that far in advance? You don't even know what really the next 10 years is going to look
Yeah.
like for that workforce, and imagine what it's going to be like there. And that's what worries me most about this kind of skills shortage piece,
Mm-hmm.
when the industry isn't moving in the right direction enough, when you've got someone that can go and work for a tech company,
Yeah.
be given flexibility, food, drink, gym time, all the things that we know that generation would respect in their workplace. But we are still get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, work your day's work, have a bacon butty, and go and sleep in digs with 5 other people in the room. And we need to move forward with it.
Yeah, don't forget that bacon butter is a magic bullet. It's you've had that and you've had your mental
Oh
well-being,
yes,
so everything's all right. But no, I mean, I've left certain sections of employment because, say for instance, you had an organisation, a tier one organisation, going, we respect our employees and we value their time with their family and their well-being. Brilliant. Okay, I love that. You're already selling me. I'm buying what you're selling. Right. Yeah. So you need to have an induction call. You need to be in the centre of London, 8 a.m. Monday morning, please. Oh, all right. And so do the other 22 people that are on your induction code. All right. So you either have to set off at 3 o'clock in the morning or leave your family the night before. And it's like, you say with one hand, we're into well-being and work-life balance, but you're not flexible with the fact that you're in central London and you're
yeah,
not moving. These are a lot of. So let's be honest with this. These are a lot of people's first travel day. So they are setting off at 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning from Scotland or the northeast or
yeah.
the northwest, and then you're expecting them to sit through a safety critical induction. And then the chances are when
And
that's
take it
done,
all in.
yeah, then the chances that you're going to want them to go out onto site that afternoon, or you are going to follow your wellbeing policy and go and find your digs. But it's that piece around the tokenistic element of because we do where I currently work have well-being included within the sort of the tender contracts that we send out. But you're dead right in what you're saying around what's that going to look like, because the mental health research now is different to what it was 10 years ago, is different to 10 years before that. But you've got to start somewhere, haven't you? So you've got to have your starting piece. And so when I've done this won't be the last thing I do with regards to mental health in the construction industry. It's very personal to me. One of the key reasons for doing it is I've got 2 young boys, 7 and 9, and they love the job that Daddy does. And I talk about being a civil engineer, safety practitioner. And I sit there, statistically speaking, one or both of them is going to follow me into this industry. And if I can, in the next 10 years, change it by 0.5% for the better, I know I'm sending my children out into the working world in a slightly better environment than when I first started it. You talk about these
Yeah,
athletes that talk about the 1% changes, but
yeah,
cumulatively, if I'm
yeah.
working on 0.5%, somebody else is working on 0.5%, and ultimately coming together, we can all make an impact on this.
Yeah, yeah. I love the marginal gains theory. I use that quite a lot actually when I'm talking, because again, people feel that they've got to solve stress. They've got to solve all the mental health challenges in the industry. I'm like, well, no, like you say, if you can move 5 things 0.5% forwards, then that's a lot when it's a cumulative effect of it. But I think there's still that whole acceptance. This is just the way the industry is, and and I think there's probably lots of people like you and I, and Steve Kerslake, and people that we know that are really becoming outspoken in this space to say, well, actually, you need to do something. You're doing nothing, and no action is probably worse than doing the wrong thing. At least try and explore more. But it's I don't know what it's going to take. Maybe the research that you're working on, Colin, is going to be the magic thing that's going to start really making people think.
There is data out there though, so I sort of doing that, because you read hundreds of research papers doing what I'm doing, and again I look at my notes here, but BAM Construct trialled a shorter working week. So you talk about work-related factors. So what they did was they, over say 3,000 employees and 141 of their sort of different sort of internal structures. They trialled a 4-day week where they increased the hours, so people still did 40 hours in those 4 days, and it was a success. And so basically the data they got back from this, so the data is out there if you want to find it, is that burnout reduced, it improved mental health, and job satisfaction increased. Why would you not want that on your construction site? So, and when they finished that trial, 90% of those 141 subsidiaries kept it on. Now, this is bizarre to me because I've never come across this lived experience, this real world experience. However, I now do a 9-day fortnight. It's amazing. I do compressed hours in that, and so those options are there. But like you were talking about, we're not changing things like, so your structural upstream is, we've always had inductions at 8 AM on a Monday. Yeah, but
that's what the workers want. They want to come in and they want to get started.
Do,
well, do they?
But you sit there and go, but times have changed. But we can't keep doing that. That provision around flexibility, or instead we're going to do inductions at 12 o'clock on a Monday because it gives people to travel down. Maybe find the digs in the morning, and that slight. It's only a subtle change. I don't think it changes anything on the programme, but you just sit there and go.
And the messaging though to the workers to say, look, we want you to get here. We want you to be ready for the day. We want to learn and take all this in. And those subtle messages are probably worth more than the time lost.
Subconscious messaging
that morning.
Absolutely. Yeah. Nothing changes if nothing changes. I was thinking about that yesterday, and it's just like, something needs to, doesn't it? So
I suppose just from what your research has looked at now, is there anything you're seeing from that kind of safety link again? Like what I mean, obviously you haven't finished your research, but any early thoughts around like how by improving mental health it might improve safety? Is there anything that you've found that's we could take away now as a reflection?
So as it is at the moment, like I said, I think I might have mentioned it before, but it's a bit like a Victorian melodrama. I already kind of knew the answer to the question I was posing, which was the impact of mental health and safety incidents in the construction industry. But it's having the data to back it up. So my statement is around, can it reduce safety incidents, and can we prevent the increase in incidents of mental health? So it's like a double whammy. And the data at the moment is leaning towards that. And so as part of my write-up, like I say, I'm unable to go in, due to academic rigour and doctoral process, I can't go into specifics until my research is published. But yes, half of people, half the participants that were interviewed and responded had either a near miss or minor to moderate safety incidents, irrespective of whether they'd been working in the industry 1 year, 5 years, 10 years. So you sit there, out of 241 people, nearly 50% of those had one of those category of incidents. And so out of those category of incidents, roughly, again, I can't go into specifics, but roughly 1 in 5-ish attributed the fact that they had that incident due to a mental health episode of distress or an ongoing issue, and so that confirmed it for me. Mental health definitely has an impact on safety. The data will tell you that. But in terms of mental health and work-related factors, conjoined is the biggest thing. So work-related factors affect mental health, and mental health affects safety. And so having that data to back up my statement will add credence, and it becomes peer reviewed, and then in 12 months' time it'll be a case of Whiteley et al. Stated that X was this, and then people will start referencing that, but they'll go on to do their own research. What kind of safety incidents do people have with mental health? And I can see my own framework and model doesn't sort of look at that, but I can see further recommended research that I'll propose will be around the lines of changing. I go up to the HSE regularly, up at the what used to be the old HSE laboratory up at Buxton, and I've been talking to some of the human factors people up there, and it's around I think there'll be a change within the next 2 or 3 years. The model that they use for incident investigation and analysis, and I think you'll see a next layer down in terms of
trying to delve into that.
So instead of, like you say, operator error or lack of attention being the root cause, it'll be, okay, if that's the case, that's just another symptom of what happened. So that's where I can see it moving to.
And I think when you think about all these organisations that are becoming so good now, their analytics for investigations and all the software that's coming out now, it wouldn't be too hard for companies to start trying to delve into that area. It's interesting because I had this conversation with another company probably a couple of years ago, and we were talking about, so from a clinical perspective where I'd come from, people get signed off for stress, and we'd know there was work-related elements that caused that, and it would often sit in the HR function. This is a separate thing. We're like, well, actually, we need to investigate this to understand what those possible things were. And like there was some examples where we had 6 people going off within one team, so there's obviously something going on there, but because they still siloed it, and like you said before, this GDPR element, well, we can't ask those questions. Well, what questions can you ask? We had a bit of a debate about it. We said, well, look, we're saying we can't ask questions, but actually a lot of these people want to share their experiences and want people to learn from it because they feel that they've been mistreated, and actually they weren't even trying to understand. And I think that the piece of work there was to try and bring HR and health and safety together to say, look, well, actually, let's talk about, we're good at accident investigations and we can learn from this stuff. We're scared to ask personal questions because we don't know what that might mean from a GDPR perspective. But actually, there's a way that they can come together, and the data, even just from that element, would be, especially in large organisations.
Well, the context drives the behaviour, doesn't it? So you could use that from anything, but you sit there and go, if you ask the wrong question in the wrong environment, you're not going to get the right answer, are you? So in terms of what you look at somebody having a safety incident or a near miss, and you're looking at how that occurred, you start threatening things like punitive action, like you're going to end up in a disciplinary. That adds to the already ongoing chronic stress that these individuals, we forget that, long working hours, excessive hours, job instability, short-term contracting, these all add to and are classed as chronic stressors. People not knowing when the next piece of work is coming along is chronic stress. It's a personal issue. No, it's not a personal issue. It's work-related factor.
They've chosen this career. They've chosen this career. They've got to accept it. That's part and parcel of working, and like you get employed, or it's you see that kind of excuse. Yeah, it's fascinating, and I actually really can't wait to read your research when it comes out, because there's so many elements there that I would regularly talk to people about, but without the evidence to back it up. So I'm really excited, and hopefully it gets in front of the right people, because there are people, CLC and Health and Construction Leadership Group, there are these organisations that are trying to do more, and something like that should be able to give them a bit more weight. But I would like to think that in the next, is it a year you think until your research is out? Or
I'm nearly at the end. So I'm in the process of writing my discussions chapter, which is the I've had my research, I've got my data, I've analysed my data. The discussion chapter is sort of talking about what does it mean. So, the results is, what are the results? And the discussions is like, well, what does this mean, and what are the gaps that it highlights? And I've kind of just submitted my second draft, so I'm hopefully going to get that back soon, and it leads me on to looking at my conclusion. But I'm hopefully submitting by summertime. And what's been brilliant about this, it's been quite a reflexive journey, in so much as I keep coming up against something going, well, what about if we did this? And none of this is copyrighted, because I want it to be in the public domain, because it's for the beneficence of everybody. But just things like, you talk about, if I had a magic wand, well, we look at STEM, right? You've got science, technology, engineering, maths. We go into primary schools. We talk about the benefits of an industry that is hurting people at the moment, from a hidden, what some people might consider as a hidden illness or issue. Add another M on the end of that. And when we're doing these workshops, you could have STEM double M, and the M being mental health. And because going into primary schools, from the data tells it, from being about 6 years old to about maybe 11, 12, 13, that is when you start to form your resilience and your mental health perceptions and your coping strategies. That is such a key, and you miss that, and then you've got to retrain your brain at a later date. It's a bit like trying to learn the bike when you never, learn to ride a bike when you didn't as a child. So I think that's a really easy win. That when you've got these 4 or 5 tables set up, and then over here you've got your mates in mind, for example, or your lighthouse charity that talk about sort of resilience and what does that look like, and reducing the stigma. And so that was one of the first ideas that I was bouncing around back at the very beginning, and it's still kind of there, but I'm sat there going, this could be doable. STEM with a double M.
Yeah, I like it. Watch your space, it's coming. But I suppose, and has that led you to, with your boys, thinking, reflecting on this and that resilience piece for your boys?
Yeah, absolutely. So I alluded to before that I've had my wife is she was a mental health practitioner. So as I started to form this, because the irony being, she's fully trained up. She's done a master's in psychology, and she's trained in mental health practitioner. When I've had my own struggles, which I'm happy to talk about, she's not been able to help me. She's recognised that I've got a problem, but she's been able to signpost me instead, because one of the parts of the training that she always kind of said was she can't help family, or at least a partner, because, to be fair, sometimes the partner is part of the problem. And so that was for me to go away. So, but she's been really helpful. And so our children, so my 2 boys, I grew up in a household where emotions weren't hidden. My dad cried in front of me. I saw emotion, and I grew up with emotion. And I'm not saying that it was a childhood traumatic experience, but that I modelled a little bit myself on my dad. And so there's been times where I've got upset in front of my children, and I can imagine other people would go, oh, I need to go into another room. I don't want my children to see me upset. But actually, there's an element of that. They're of an age now where they go, why is Daddy upset? And it'd be like, well, I'm missing my dad, who's passed away, and it would have been his birthday today. And so I'm sort of going, and it's okay to cry, son, and it's okay to get upset. And so one of the things I did, I don't know whether this was a bit self-effacing or not, but my children's primary school do something called like a buddy system. So they're implementing the mental health element at school. And so I'm a big badge collector. I love badge collecting. And so I had a little Google. I went onto eBay and I found, remember the old prefect badges that used to say prefect and things like that? It said buddy on it, like a buddy system, something like that. And the metallic greens and the metallic yellows and stuff. I loved it. And so I privately bought them, and I said, how many buddies are there at the primary school? Because I want these buddies to be proud that people can go up to and sit on a bench and have a chat. And I ended up spending about 40 odd badges with a few spare. And I can still see them a couple of years later walking around with these buddy badges on. So people can identify, a bit like wearing your mental health first aid green cross, isn't it? And I just thought, for children, it kind of visually embodied they put the hand up to volunteer to be somebody to talk to. I thought, well, that's their little reward, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, I've got a badge.
Yeah.
You've not got a badge. You know, but it got the others interested. Well, have you got a badge? What does that mean? And it just got them talking again. And so, surprisingly, my children's primary school are very into mental health, and it goes into that piece around they're of the perfect age to have that resilience taught and built in. I mean, some of it's genetics, obviously, but some of it's taught behaviour as well.
Yeah, no, definitely. I'm just reflecting on the way I am with my daughter sometimes, and I think, she's 4, so there's lots of emotional times. Just trying to think, like, as a parent, what's the best way? I mean, now there's so much information, like you could go on social media, it's telling you you're a bad parent every single day, and you shouldn't speak to them like this, you shouldn't do that. And I'm like, what do I do? Just tell me. But she's only just started school, so I'm hoping that the school has got a couple more years to really influence her in that space. But you can only do the best you can with the knowledge that you've got at the time, as I tell myself. Colin, thank you so much. Is there anything that we haven't covered? I know that we've completely not followed our question set of where we intended to go, because it's just naturally flowed through.
It's
but
fine.
Is there any other key points?
Nothing that we haven't discussed, but like I say, there's the element, if anybody's got anything to comment about with regards to what we have discussed, I am absolutely open to further discussion with anybody out there about what my research currently means. But in terms of my framework and my model, it really is focusing on the upstream elements rather than the sort of tokenistic downstream bits and pieces. So without using the jargon, it's things like how are they developing their interventions and the policies, and how does that look for the boots on the ground, because a lot of it just gets lost in translation, and the accessibility is just not there at the moment.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think that sometimes the things you see that fit into the corporate world, how does that translate to a construction site? I mean, that's, we built our whole business niche to construction because it is very different in certain situations. And we've got to understand those complexities of all of the industry to try and find things that fit. So I'm really looking forward to seeing it, and good luck with it all, Colin. I think there's a big space for you in this industry to try and make that, even that 0.5% improvement. If you can do that before you retire,
Fingers crossed,
You've done some great stuff. Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for listening, for everyone. We'll make sure that all Colin's details are in the show notes. So if you'd like to get in touch or learn more about his research, and I'm sure when he's ready to publish all those final things, we can have him back and we can learn a bit more about those specifics. But Colin, thank you so much. And we look forward to hearing more about everything that you're doing. So thank you.